So I'm delighted today to be joined by Professor David Boud, who's an Alfred Deakin Professor and Director for the Centre of Research in Assessment and Digital Learning, or CRADLE as many of us know it, at Deakin University. And of course, David is also an Emeritus Professor at UTS in Sydney as well. Many of you might have seen recently, he and others as editors released a book, Reimaging University Assessment in the Digital World. And so it's great to have David join us today. So David, technology, many academics see technology as a force for good, and others kind of see it as a force for evil when it comes to assessment. How can it be harnessed for good?
Yeah, well, technology is just technology. I mean, it's whatever you make of it, and it can be used for good or not so good or whatever. And one of the traps, of course, is that people that are educationally unsophisticated use technology in ways that are regressive. So they use the affordances of technology to do things that we were stopping doing in the classroom some time back, but it's the easiest thing to do. And assessment is a classic example of that. It's dead easy to write really, really bad multiple choice items, and it's really easy to use technology to get students to complete these and have a nice record online. But that isn't good practice. So technology can afford poor educational practice or good educational practice. It's just how we use it. So I don't like the idea of using the term technology enhanced learning. It's like, what can we use technology for that enables us to solve educational problems?
Okay, so is there a difference? So is there a difference between we're designing an assessment for a multiple choice quiz I'm writing on paper to a multiple choice quiz I might be running online?
Well, it's not the writing of the items per se, it's what you do with it. And by and large, a lot of the issues to do with when technology doesn't work is not so much the technology itself, but the things that go around it. So for example, if we're using multiple choice tests in an online context, what technology enables us to do is to have students take a little quiz or a test of some kind, get their response, and then they get a pretty good answer straight away. And not only that, they can actually get details of, if you choose that item, why is that not a good choice? What is the issue? It can then direct them to other material and so on and so forth. So the test itself might not be fundamentally different from any other diagnostic multiple choice test. They're incredibly hard to write, whatever the context. It's the things that go around it that make the difference.
Yes.
And it's hard to do that without the technology. You can't actually quickly direct students to useful resources, and technology comes in, helps us with that. Very helpful.
Okay. Now, I believe, as you write in the book I mentioned earlier, I believe you like to use the term assessment as portrayal, and what digital solutions we need to find around that. Could you riff on that for a bit?
Yeah, I think this is one of the kind of up and coming hot issues in assessment generally. And that is, we've got this really quaint idea about assessment. So when students graduate, they get this piece of paper, and listed on the piece of paper is a list of the subjects or units they've taken, and there's a list of kind of grades or whatever against those units. What does that portray to someone who doesn't know what the individual subjects or units are? And the answer is just about zero. And what we're finding now is our students are saying, well, I'm one of hundreds of students graduating with this particular named degree. I'm leaving the university and I want assessment to help me differentiate myself from all the other students graduating at the same time with the same qualification, having supposedly met the same learning outcomes. So this is a serious problem that we need to address. And assessment can help us do that, and technology can enable that, but we need to get the assessment thinking right in the first place. So for example, an illustration of one of the things that we're doing at Deakin is we have these things called Deakin hallmarks. And they're kind of, they're digital credentials, but it's not the credential itself which is the issue. It's like what you need to do to get it and what the credential portrays. So, for example, students have to do some work over and above that required for whatever units they're doing. They choose a particular generic learning outcome to do it in, and they do that work not just in terms of an academic piece of work, but they do it in conjunction with the world outside the university. There are criteria established for hallmark, and they're judged by a panel of people that include both academics and people from the profession or community. So when you get this hallmark, you can click on it, you can add it to your LinkedIn profile, you can put it wherever you like, embed it in your CV, you click through it, and you get a portrayal of what the student has done to achieve it. Not only that, it says what criteria they had to meet to get it. Not only that, it says who made the judgment. So all that is kind of locked up in a simple digital credential. Mm-hmm. Now that's just one illustration. The other thing which I think we need to be doing is, if we move beyond that old university transcript with the list of grades against units, we need to move away towards what are the learning outcomes that students have met. That's how we need to portray it. And not only that, we need to be able to help students portray and curate their own achievements in such a way that they can present their best face to the world. Mm-hmm. And a part of that is things that they've constructed, but also embedded in that, I see various kind of digital credentials that are the validations by the university of parts of their portrayal. Mm. So they portray themselves widely, and that might vary from job to job or whatever they want to do, and it will evolve over time. But as part of that thing they curate, there's various kind of digital credentials which the university provides and validates, that enables them to say, well, you know, this is based upon a solid underpinning. It isn't just something students have made up.
Mm-hmm. So if a student had a badge or a digital credential around corporate communications or something like that, is that enough in itself, or do they need to evidence that in other ways through other means?
Well, the digital credential captures whatever it is the student did. Mm. The thing that we've got to avoid is thinking about badges in a very kind of naive ways. We're talking about micro-credentials now in too micro a form, too reductionistic a form. You know, we're looking at the smallest unit of achievement that you can have and then put them together. Now, what you're going to get is you're going to have mountains and mountains and mountains of these things. Mm-hmm. So the issue with micro-credentials is, how do we think really smartly about them? How do we think about, well, stackable is one of the ways in which it's being talked about at the moment. How do they go together? Mm-hmm. But really, what we need to be asking ourselves is, what do they really represent? Mm. And if you go to them or click on them, as that's what they're there for, we need them to represent something of interest and something of meaning. So the thing that you get in the face, if you're an employer clicking on one of these things, is, what substantively did the student do to get this? Mm. If they want to go further, they can click down into criteria and all the other stuff. Mm. But it is to do with rich portrayal, not a simplistic, naive portrayal that some people are using badges for, which is, I think that will get the whole thing a bad name.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just to extend that a little bit. So, you know, one notion is you take a full credit point course, you break it up into 4 bits and do 4 credentials around those bits, and then get a credit into the university. But does that undersell assessment? I mean, does that disperse assessment too much? So you've got to assess it somehow, but is the tendency just to assess that with a quiz or something like that, as opposed to some other form of more meaningful or authentic assessment? Are we underselling assessment through breaking?
No. I mean, what we should be using is using the technology to enable authentic, rich assessments. Mm. Right? That's what we need to be doing. In fact, we need to be stamping out these trivial, low-level quizzes and tests. Right? Mm-hmm. No one in the world wants to do that. We need assessment items and assessment tasks that enable students to pull things together and enable them to put their knowledge to work to something meaningful.
Yes.
People in the world outside aren't interested in these kind of fragmentary bits of knowledge. What they're interested in is what students can make of it and what, they can put together, what can they show is meaningful in terms of tackling an issue that someone outside will think, oh yeah, that's really worth doing.
Mm-hmm. So they get a credential, but what's that bit of work that they did to achieve that credential? Does that become part of the evidence in this?
Absolutely.
Yes. And how is that portrayed? Does that do an e-portfolio? I mean, it can't necessarily be done through LinkedIn. And
well, the e-portfolio is in a sense the wrapper, the container for these things.
Yes.
So that the students would have an e-portfolio. I mean, in fact, nowadays we're dropping the word e because it doesn't make sense to have portfolios that aren't e anymore. So the portfolio is the kind of container, and the students will add things to the container. Some of those will be validated, accredited credentials, from various parts of their course. Other things they will add will be whatever else they want to contain and retain that they can then subsequently curate in a way that will portray themselves for various purposes.
Yes.
So yeah, we should be enabling students to build their portfolios. We should be assisting them in that. And we should have a technological solution that means they can carry that with them forever.
Yeah, cool. So we're running out of time here, but any last inspirational thoughts for people? So these recordings are predominantly for people leading technology-enhanced learning within universities. What are some of the inspirational thoughts or last inspirational thoughts you'd have?
Oh, I'm not into inspirational thoughts. I'm a very pragmatic person. What I think is important is that we need to start always with the substantive issue and not allow technology to distract us from what the substantive issue is. So, for example, in assessment, the substantial issue is how do we actually assess learning outcomes rather than subjects or units, right? At the moment, we're crazily, portraying the wrong thing. The higher education standards wants us to assure learning outcomes, but we don't record them. We don't record them. Like it's crazy. We're kind of breaking all the rules. So let's focus on what's important. And what's important is things like learning outcomes, things like how students portray their achievements, and so on and so forth. So let's focus on that, and let's focus on the things that surround the bits of technology, because it's not the technology bit that's interesting. It's what goes around it. What are the educational activities we need to think about in conjunction with it? Beautiful.
Wonderful. Now, I believe CRADLE's having a conference in October.
Yep.
So, University Assessment, Learning and Teaching, New Research Directions for the Post-Digital World. You're going to be speaking at this conference, David? I'm on one of the panels and doing various things behind the scenes, yes. Yes. Okay.
And everyone can sign up for this. It's free and it's all online.
Yeah,
but
cool.
Please, if you sign up, please come, because the problem with signing up is that people sign up just in case.
Yeah. Good.
The program's just about to be released, so if you go to the CRADLE website, you can find it there.
Yeah, and it's on the 19th and 20th of October. Look, thanks so much, David, for sparing a few minutes to talk with us. It's been very valuable, and wish you all the best.
Thanks very much, Michael.